Stand by.
If there's one piece of advice I offer other moms out there, it's to stay calm and keep to the plan.
Parents plan ahead. Some don't. Make sure you know where to find your family in an emergency. Some will plan at ready.gov. Public service announcement brought to you by Freeman Media Council.
This is WGBB AM 1240 and W240 DFFM 95.9 Freeport, New York.
The views expressed in the following program do not necessarily represent those of the staff, management, or owners of WGBB. Live from Merrick, New York, this is SportsTalk 1240.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Sports Talk 1240, right here on WGBB 1240 AM, Long Island's oldest radio station. Thanks for sticking around here with me tonight on this rainy Sunday night. We got a lot to talk about tonight. We got two very, very interesting NFL games with the Jets blowing a game in devastating fashion in Tennessee. We got the New York Giants coming up with a huge overtime victory today. And we got the New York Mets coming up with the big trade of the winter so far for Robinson Cano. There's a lot to talk about. The New York Rangers retiring Vic Hadfield's number 11. So it's the second number 11 going up in the MSG Rafters, joining Mark Messier of the 94 team and everything. So we got a lot on the table tonight, but thanks for sticking with me here tonight for the 9 p.m. hour. If you want to see more about Sports Talk 1240, you can check us out on Twitter at Sports Talk 1240. You can give us a like on Facebook, Sports Talk 1240, and check us out on SportsTalk1240.com and see all the hosts and the schedules that we have coming up. The next time I'll be on, as a matter of fact, is December 30th, so pencil that into your calendars. But thanks for tuning in tonight, and let's get started. As you could probably figure if you know me, we're going to start with the Mets, talking the Robinson Cano trade. Big stuff today in the baseball world. We got, came in late last night that the trade was officially finalized. The teams still haven't come out and made the announcement yet, but it's pretty much a foregone conclusion at this point that Robinson Cano, especially if he didn't have his suspension last season, would be going into the Hall of Fame on roller skates, especially as a second baseman with his offensive numbers. And young pitcher Edwin Diaz, 24-year-old right-handed closer, saved 57 games last season for the Seattle Mariners with an ERA under 2, 1.96. 73 innings, struck out 124 batters. So, if you know anything about baseball, those are some standout, eye-popping numbers. But it didn't come cheap. It didn't come lightly, as the Mets had to give up a lot in return. It starts off pretty easy. It starts off, you think, okay, they gave up Jay Bruce and Anthony Swarzak. They're giving up $34 million there in commitments for the next 2 years. Two guys who really soured the fan base. I'm not saying, I don't think Jay Bruce is washed. I think Jay Bruce is going to go to Seattle and probably have a productive year, especially where they can slot him in at the DH. I don't really know much about Anthony Swarzak. I don't think much of him either, but you never know. I could see him coming out and having a decent season next year. But this is all about making the team better. But we didn't get to the main cost. They gave up 3 prospects in this deal. Justin Dunn, who was drafted number 19 overall in 2016 out of Boston College. He was considered the 89th overall prospect in Major League Baseball, the top 100 overall prospects. They had to give up Jared Kelenic, who they drafted number 6 overall this past year, 2018, out of high school. He was the number 62 overall prospect, and he hit .286 in rookie ball this year. Still hasn't taken an at-bat beyond that, which means he hasn't even seen single A yet. And they also had to give up a piece they got back in the Addison Reed deal 2 years ago. They got back Garrison Batista. He was included in this trade. I'm sure not many people are upset to see him gone in this trade, but he was a good right-handed pitcher who could throw the ball 100 miles an hour. So if he ever figures it out, he could be a good piece for a competitive team. And right now, when you look at that load of prospects that they got, many fans are split. Do you like this trade? Do you not like this trade? Did they give up too much? Did they take on too much money? And to be honest with you, even though I am being positive on this trade, the Mets probably did overpay. They probably did give too much in this trade, but nobody really knows that yet. I mean, there are so many people have run down the name of prospects over the last few days since this trade has been speculated about, and you can go run the gamut with names that people will still laugh at to this day. Names like Ed Yarnell, Lastings Millage, Alex Escobar. You could go on and on and on about all these guys that just didn't pan out for whatever the reason. And I do think that it's not an open and shut case like that. You're not going to look at it and say, oh, well, obviously these guys are all prospects. They're lottery tickets. Who knows what you got? You might as well just get rid of them for a 36-year-old second baseman making $20 million a year. Now, that might not sound like a positive spin on it, but what I'm saying is that they really, you don't know that, like, there's a good side and a bad side to this deal. Like, on the back end, you probably gave up too much. But you got back this guy, Edwin Diaz. You got back Robinson Cano, who's you figure he's going to be productive for you for the next at least year or two. The last, 2 or 3 years of that contract might get a little sketchy. But who knows? A guy like Cano who's stayed healthy and has played 150 games every season at least until this past year where he was suspended for PEDs. So he only played in 80 games, and PEDs are performance-enhancing drugs, meaning he took some kind of steroid or something along those lines, and he was suspended for half the season because of it. And he wouldn't have been eligible to play in the postseason this year if the Mariners had made it. And they did win 89 games. But aside from that, I'm going to put all of my feelings aside. I like Jared Kalanick. I like Justin Dunn. I actually met Justin Dunn in spring training a couple of years ago. And my cousin Danny got his autograph. And he was a really nice guy. It was nice. We actually watched a bullpen by him. I watched closely last year as he worked his way through Single A in St. Lucie. He made his way up to Binghamton, where his results were, less than impressive. Up and down. He kind of got knocked around a little bit, had an ERA north of 4. But, I do think that Justin Dunn has a bright future, although a lot of scouts seem to think he's more of a relief pitcher than a starting pitcher, which I could definitely see. And, the main thing, as much as I do like Justin Dunn, he's 23 years old. He's only a year younger than Justin Dunn. I think, his best baseball is ahead of him, most likely, but I don't know if he's going to give you much better than what Edwin Diaz is going to give you, to be quite honest. And when you look at it from the other perspective, okay, Jared Kalanick, Jared Kalanick is the only guy in this deal that I'm really almost losing sleep over, trading this guy. Just a little bit. He's the only guy that I would even go that far. So to think that you got a Hall of Fame second baseman in Robbie Cano, you got one of, if not the best young, controllable relief pitchers closing out the games now for the Mets. Fans want to make a big deal and scream and moan about giving up these young guys, but I like what the Mets are doing. And you know what? If you're one of the Met fans like me who've complained over the last few years, especially after the World Series season, about this team's inactivity and their just, lackadaisical nature, especially when it comes to free agents, and even the aggressiveness in the trade market. There were so many deals that were potentially on the table the last few years for the Mets that worked out perfectly on paper, but Sandy Alderson, just for whatever reason, had no interest in it. And, I'm willing to let this aggressive approach play its way out. I want to see where we're going with this. But the bottom line is this can't be the last piece, because the Mets aren't a contending team now. This isn't a slam dunk 100-win team. Okay, boys, let's show up in spring training and get things done. No, there's still a lot of pieces that have to be done. The Mets still need another right-handed bat that's going to balance out this lineup because they're very left-handed heavy right now. And even if you sign a right-handed catcher and Peter Alonso wins a starting job, you probably need another right-handed stick somewhere out there, maybe center field, something like that. Because I don't know about you, but I'm not putting my laurels in in Juan Lagares' basket this year, because he just he's proven that he's an unreliable talent at this point. And to be honest, it would make me happy if if Brody Van Wagenen could unload his contract. And not that $9 million is a big hit for a guy like Lagares, but I'm telling you right now, his defense is going to regress. I can see it already. I could see when we see him in spring training or early in this season, and you could just hear Gary Cohen say, well, it looks like Juan Lagares isn't getting to these balls that he used to get to. And we were even seeing it a little bit last year and the year before. So he's not the slam dunk defensively that he once was in 2013 and 2014. And, especially with all these injuries, I just don't have any confidence in Juan Lagares whatsoever. So they're going to have to go out and figure it out beyond this trade. But you know what? Another point of view that I want to take on this Cano trade before we move on is that the Phillies were in the mix in this trade too. Now, they didn't want Cano, but they were in the mix for Diaz. And that's a big thing that a lot of Met fans have to put into perspective, because it looked like they wanted Diaz, and Diaz is the big part of this deal. This is going to be called the Edwin Diaz trade, and I know I'm like the 800th person to have said that so far if you've been listening as closely as I have, but it's the truth, it's the absolute truth, that this is going to turn out to the Edwin Diaz trade. Robbie Cano, it's going to be good that Robbie Cano is on the team. It's going to be a much-needed bat in this very light lineup, especially from what we saw from Jake last year, leading the league in ERA by far, but only winning 10 games because of an anemic offense. So, when you don't discount the Phillies being involved in this, because the Phillies are going to get Gene Segura, most likely. It looks like it's going to go that way. They've got a very aggressive approach to this offense, to this offseason, much like Brody Van Wagenen and the Mets do. So, don't discount the Phillies. They're going to be spending money. They're going to be trading prospects. They're going to be. I wouldn't surprise me if they brought back Gene Segura, and that might be why Brody had to pay a little bit more. And to be honest, I know that when we first heard that the Mariners were going to be chipping in $60 million to help offset the pay for Robbie Cano, right? We all heard, it was going to be $60 million, along with them assuming all these salaries, and that the Mets really are going to be getting him at a discounted rate. Well, now we find out that it's $20 million, and we have Met fans that are complaining about the Wilpons taking on money. Whoever would have thought in any world over the last few years that we'd hear Met fans complaining about this team spending money? And it's just funny when you sit back and say that out loud, because it's the only thing that Met fans have been hammering home over the last few seasons, and especially since this Bernie Madoff business began. And to be quite honest, it's something that I'm very happy to see. It's something that I've been screaming about and tweeting about and complaining about to Mets. Whenever I see them, Mets management or whatever. I'm down at spring training every year, and I got a loud mouth. So it's just one of those things where it's nice to see. And I'm not going to sit here and complain about it. Whether I think they gave up too much in this trade, they probably did, to be quite honest. But you've got to give to get. And if the only guy that you had to give up that you really, really didn't want to part with in this trade is Jared Kelenic, who's a 19-year-old outfielder who's got a bright future, but has not even seen an at bat in single A, I can take it. I could take that hit every day of the week and twice on Sunday, which is today, by the way. And so like I said, there's still a few things to do. And another thing that I like about this Brodie Van Wagenen now, this aggressive approach, is that they've been linked to a bunch of big names already. They were talking to Yan Gomes with the Indians, the catcher, right-handed catcher, who I like a lot. He calls a good game. He's a pretty good defensive catcher. He's got a nice bat. He ended up getting dealt to the Nationals, but the Mets were in on those talks. Now, another guy the Mets have been talking about, the Cleveland Indians, is Corey Kluber, star right-handed pitcher, former Cy Young winner. This is a guy who's got a very good history. He's 33 years old, so it's not ideal, and he makes a good amount of money, but he's got a history with Mickey Callaway, the former pitching coach from the Cleveland Indians, and a very successful one at that. And it's gonna be, it's just very encouraging to me to see that Brodie has the Mets even involved in a Corey Kluber talk. We've heard the Mets whispered, not necessarily so much with Manny Machado, but the Mets have actually been whispered in Bryce Harper talks. Now, do I believe it? No. Does it really make sense with him as a lefty? Well, you know what? I mean, I'm not going to think that far ahead. If the Mets want to give Bryce Harper a contract, I'll bet 1 to 9 lefties if that's what it takes. But there's a lot going into it. I think Brodie has a plan, and that's something that can't be discounted. When the Mets hired Brodie Van Wagenen in October, one of the first things that the Wilpons, the owner, specifically Jeff Wilpon, came out and said that he hasn't seen his father Fred this excited by a plan, by a something that has been laid out by a general manager or team president or something like that in this long. And his vision, which is what everybody keeps talking about, Brodie's vision. Brodie's vision is what everybody keeps talking about, and I'm starting to like this vision. The aggressive vision, the aggressive approach. Let's put the Mets back in the winner's circle where they belong, where they haven't been for so long. Where even though we got to that World Series, things fell apart so quickly after it that you really forget about it. And even though they made the playoffs back-to-back years, it didn't feel like sustained success. And that's unfortunate. And when you look and see the Mets being mentioned in all these things, and then you look and say that there's a couple pieces that make sense for the Mets too. I mean, we talked about right-handed bats. You got to talk about the bullpen next. Now you've addressed closer Edwin Diaz, taking over for the role that was formerly Jerry Familia's job the last few seasons, and was actually Robert Gesellman's after he left. So you can sit here and say that when you look at it, that Andrew Miller really fits where this team's going. They haven't brought back Jerry Blevins yet. He's a free agent at the moment, and he was their only lefty in the pen for most of last season until the end when they brought up a young kid, Daniel Zamora, who, as much as I like him, I wouldn't guarantee that kid a spot on this team. You have to bring in a lefty or two. Miller is where I'd start. His history with Mickey Callaway I like a lot. Mickey knows how to use him, knows how many innings he can do, his pitch count, and I feel like Mickey would be able to really balance him out well. And actually, his worst season was the first year that he didn't work with Mickey Callaway the last few years. So that's something to keep in the back of your mind. Maybe he is in the mood to reunite with his former pitching coach, which I'd love to see personally. And there's a couple other guys out there. Adam Ottavino, the New Yorker, who a lot of people have been whispering to take the spot of David Robertson on the other side of town, in the Bronx. So that's a possibility. He's from New York, so I think he's from Brooklyn. So I believe that he wants a return to his hometown. There's a couple other guys like Adam Warren, who I would take a look at. I heard the Mets have been kicking the tires on him. He's another former Yankee, and he's a guy who, was on the 2016 Cubs, ended up coming back to the Yankees in the Chapman trade. And this guy, he's a guy that can start, he can long relieve, and he can middle relieve, and He can get big outs when you need him to. That's why I would not mind seeing him there. Although he kind of gives you the same thing that Seth Lugo does, and you kind of want to keep in the back of your mind how many guys like that you want. And the other guy would be the former Yankee, also David Robertson, who's on the market right now. It would be nice to see him over here, but you never know what's going on with him. The two guys that you could probably rule out, or anybody of their ilk, is Zach Britton and Craig Kimbrell. Unless Britton is convinced to come here and take a setup role, which I don't know if he would be willing to do, considering him and Kimbrell can both get big-time closers money this offseason. There's a lot of open holes across the league in the closer's position. Now you got to move on to a little bit of sad news as the Mets non-tendered Wilmer Flores this past Friday. If you're a Met fan like me who remembers the 2015 July night where the camera was zooming in on Wilmer's face as he was crying, thinking that he'd been traded to the Milwaukee Brewers from the Mets for Carlos Gomez in the trade that ended up getting canceled, and the Mets got Cespedes after that and didn't have to give up Wilmer Flores. But, so they non-tendered him. They brought back Travis d'Arnaud, which is an eye roller for me. I just don't get that. If it was up to me, I would have done it the other way around. I probably would have tendered a contract to Flores and non-tendered d'Arnaud. But there's a case to be made for non-tendering Wilmer Flores. As much as I love the guy, and as much as Met fans do, and the sentimental feelings that we have towards this kid, he's got bad knees. He misses time every year. The last time the guy even gave the Mets close to a full season was 2015. He basically plays in 110, 115 games every year. And even that 2015 season, he still ended up missing 25 games. He only played in 137 games that year. So, I'm a big Wilmer fan. I'll always have a place in my heart for him, but looks like it'll work out better for him in the American League too, where he doesn't have to be out there every day counted on defensively. He could be a role player, and he could get a lot of at-bats as a DH. I could see him getting 400, 500 at-bats next year for a team with a DH and hitting 20, 25 home runs, driving in 75, 80 RBIs. And I'd feel really good for Wilmer because he would deserve that. It's just a matter of, if he can land a job, hopefully a guaranteed contract. But I think he'd at least get invited to spring training. And once again, I just don't get that Travis d'Arnaud re-up and bringing him back. But, I think the Mets know that. I think he's a safety net, if anything else. And I think he's either going to get traded or they're going to see if he can give them anything one last time in spring training and then just cut him off at the end of spring training if he is not giving them what they need. And there's one other thing, and I know I'm running along with the Mets here, people, but listen, we had a lot of news the last couple of weeks, and I haven't been on, so we're catching up. It's all quiet on the Yankees front, too, so we'll touch on them a little bit later as well. But before we take our first break here, I'd like to just point out the fact that getting lost in the shuffle over the last week or so is that the Mets made a couple of hires, and a couple of hires that I think are very astute, very good hires for Brodie Van Wagenen. Now, they hired Allard Byard as Vice President, Assistant GM, and he's the head of the scouting and player development for the New York Mets now. This is a guy who won 3 championships in Boston since 2006. He's been in their front office working under Theo Epstein, Dave Dombrowski, Ben Sherrington, who was there for a couple of years but did win a ring. And, so he was a trusted guy there who they said had a big hand in signing and developing guys along the lines of Mookie Betts and, Xander Bogaerts and things like that. And, so that kind of makes you say that this guy is a very good piece. He's also a former GM. He was the GM of the Kansas City Royals. He got hired there in '98. I believe he was there till like 2003 or so. He was also the guy, actually, the Kansas City Royals GM that traded Glendon Rush from the New York Mets to from the Kansas City Royals to the New York Mets. So that's something to keep in mind too. Is I didn't even know that. I saw that Glendon Rush actually pointed that out on Twitter himself, and he also expressed a deep appreciation for Mr. Byard's baseball IQ and his ability to scout and understand talent. So to hear that high praise coming from a guy who got traded by him kind of tells you what his and how he is viewed in Major League Baseball. Another name that they picked up is Adam Guttridge, who is being brought in as an analytics guy. He's a guy who's got a very good reputation in Major League Baseball right now. He, he's one of those guys that has been around the block. He knows exactly, what he wants to get done, and supposedly, if that he likes to take a different approach to defensive positioning and things along those lines, and moving guys a little bit more to the left or to the right in certain situations. And he is a big advocate of the analytics side of defensive positioning, and I think that's something that has been that the Mets have needed for the last few years, because they really have been lacking on the analytics side of the ball. And finally, another great hire by the Mets, in my opinion, former Reds, Cubs, Nationals, so on and so forth, manager Jim Riggleman as the bench coach. One big mistake the Mets did going into last season was they didn't have an American League guy in their bench to help Mickey Callaway, acclimate himself to National League style baseball, which is what happened in a game against Jim Riggleman and his Cincinnati Reds last season when the Mets batted out of order. And I really believe that Riggleman's going to add that experience in there. He's going to really help Mickey Callaway. Mickey Callaway had Gary DiSarcina and, a bunch of American League guys who just, and also they didn't have one day of experienced Major League manager in their dugout last year. Now, that's a big thing, too. You really have to have that experience, especially when you have a guy that hasn't done it before in Mickey Callaway. He kind of learned under fire last year, unfortunately, Mickey did. But he got around to it at the end of the year. They really started playing better. And I think that Jim Riggleman being on the bench next season will only help him. Absolutely. And, so that pretty much does that for this, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to take our first break of the day. Now, I want you to stick around, too, because at the end of the show, I'm going to be playing a sneak peek for Daniel Bobo Curlin. If you know him, he's a great guy from the old Dopey and Anthony show. We're going to be playing a sneak peek of his album, Jingle Bells. We'll be right back, and just stick around because the last 10 minutes or so we'll be getting into that. Thank you, and we'll be right back.
Cool.
Forgot about it.
You forgot about it. Are you taking phone calls? Are you taking phone calls? It's up to you. You take those, no?
Yeah, no, as long as, who is it?
I don't ask that. And sometimes I want these people actually listen. They just know that sports is on, so they want to talk about sports, but they don't follow along with like whatever area the host is in.
Yeah.
You'll be talking about hockey, they want to go baseball. It throws off your flow.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, when we come out of the break, we'll do the normal music coming out. I'll do my little sports shtick, this day in sports history,
And that's when
and I'll give you the point, and we'll go right into football music.
Gotcha.
And then after that, my little football bit, if there's anybody on hold, I'll take that.
Okay, I'll make sure I get a first name for it.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, if it's, I believe my cousin told me he might call it.
Oh, okay. What's his first name?
His name's Dan, but he might just use his crazy name. So.
Oh, okay.
Is the only umbrella that won't flip inside out, rip, tear, or leak, capable of withstanding winds over 55 miles per hour. All of our umbrellas are constructed of the finest quality materials and backed by a limited lifetime guarantee. What are you waiting for? Visit Ghostbusters.com and get your Ghostbuster today.
Sunday night beginning at 8 p.m. right here on Long Island's AM 1240 WGBB, the station that serves your community. And now, back to the show.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, and we're back here on Sunday night here, December 2nd, and that's going to take us to this day in sports history. This day in sports history, on December 2nd, 1967, Wilt Chamberlain set an NBA record by missing 22 free throws in one game. However, his Sixers ended up holding on in a 130-121 victory over the Baltimore Bullets in Philly. December 2nd, 1981, Fernando Mania continues to hit new heights as the Dodgers lefty is named the 1981 NL Rookie of the Year, capping off an incredible season where he took home the Rookie of the Year, Cy Young, and went 3-1 in the playoffs en route to the Dodgers' first World Series since 1965. December 2nd, 1985, Chicago Bears head coach Mike Ditka and defensive coordinator Buddy Ryan nearly come to blows on the sideline during a Monday night loss to Dan Marino and the Miami Dolphins. This would be their only loss that season en route to their only Super Bowl championship. December 2nd, 1987, the 334 Club is born as the 334 New Jersey Devils fans braved over 20 inches of snow to get to the Meadowlands to witness the Devils' 7-5 victory over the Calgary Flames. And December 2nd, 1995, after being left in to allow career-worst 9 goals in an 11-1 loss to the Detroit Red Wings, goalie Patrick Waugh declares that this was his last game in Montreal, and he was traded to the Colorado Avalanche 4 days later. He'd go on to win the Stanley Cup that year. Montreal is still looking for their first since he left. December 2nd, 1999, Bobby Bonilla, actually not Bobby Bonilla, Robin Ventura signs his contract. Bobby Bonilla was traded that day, but Robin Ventura signs his contract to join the New York Mets 4 years, $32 million, as Ventura would set up the season where he would hit a bunch of grand slams for the Mets, have one of the best single seasons in New York Met history, and finally hit that grand slam single that everyone remembers in the NLCS. And finally, on December 2nd, 2003, the bidding began on a baseball that was deflected only weeks earlier by Cubs fan Steve Bartman. It would only take a few weeks for the winning bidder to claim their prize for the price of $106,000. The ball would be blown up in a ceremony at a sports bar outside of Wrigley Field, and that is this day in sports history. Alright, and it's that time of year again where the NFL season is upon us. Week 13 is nearly complete, and have you won big yet? I have, because I go to BetDSI.com. BetDSI is an A-plus rated sportsbook, and it's been around since 1998. In the last 20 years, they've built an impeccable reputation for great service and fast payment, combined with an excellent mobile interface so you can play, win, and get paid anywhere, anytime. And if you sign up for a new account and use my promo codes, Coffee100, BetDSI will double your money up to a $500 deposit. Or, if you want to try it for free, use my promo code Coffee25 and BetDSI will give you a $25 free play just for being my listener. So far, I'm 12-4 picking games this season, as I covered with the Bears on Thanksgiving over the Lions last week. This week, BetDSI has the defending Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles as the favorite Monday night, -6 over the Redskins in Philly. The Redskins are in a free fall since the unfortunate Alex Smith injury, but I don't expect it to end this week. The Cowboys are on a run right now, but don't forget about the Eagles as they look to keep themselves in the race. I think they get it done this week, definitely closing out -6 with ease. Don't forget that BetDSI doesn't only offer the best NFL odds, but NCAA, MLB, NBA, NHL, boxing, UFC, and more. You can even bet on politics. Don't stand on the sideline. Just check them out at BetDSI.com, that's BetDSI.com, and use either of my promo codes, Coffee100, to earn double up to a $500 deposit, or Coffee25 for a $25 free play and double your bankroll, or get $25 free today with BetDSI.com. Is there somebody on hold?
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for sticking with me here tonight on Sports Talk 1240. I am your host, Rob Cramer, and if you want to talk to me tonight, you can give me a call at 516-623-1240. That's 516-623-1240. We can talk about anything you want. We could talk about the Cano trade, talk about the devastating NFL games, talk about Vic Hadfield night at the Garden, or a very impressive Knicks victory last night. We'll get to that a little bit later. But until then, let's stick with the NFL. As, it was a tale of two cities today for the Jets and the Giants, as the New York Jets just completely fell apart in the second half of today's game. They were up 16-0 at one point, 16-6 at halftime. And, it just completely, one of the ugliest losses that you can ever see out there. As Sam Bradford didn't start again. They started Josh McCown. It was all defense in the first half for the Jets. We're seeing some life. We're seeing a heartbeat out of Tremaine Johnson, the $72 million man who the Jets signed in this offseason, was supposed to be a top cornerback for the team. He's been injured and underplaying so far. A lot of fans that say he's not worth the money, not worth what they spent. But right now he really took it up a notch in the first half today, as he picked off a Marcus Mariota pass, took it back for an interception, a return touchdown, pick six, and it put the Jets up 10-0 after their opening drive field goal started the game. Then they had Kevin Pierre-Louis blocked a punt, setting the Jets up at the 18, eventually led to another field goal, 5 of which today were hit by, a kicker. For them, this kid is having a Pro Bowl type season, really, kicker of the year type stuff. He made 7 kicks in one game earlier this year against the Colts, made 5 today. It looked like the 5 straight losses was really motivating this team to get up off the mat and get things done. But unfortunately, they got kicked right in the gut for loss number 6. And, Coach Todd Bowles, lame duck, was going out there saying that he's fuming today. I'm sorry, Coach, but you picked 5 years too late to start fuming. You should have been fuming after that Buffalo loss in 2015, Week 17, when they choked out a playoff berth by losing 24-17 to a team that had nothing to play for. But you're fuming after blowing a 16-0 lead, a 22-13 lead today, to a potential playoff team in Tennessee. As the Jets are now 3-9, to be honest, I'm happy they didn't win this game. It would have been nice for me to sit back and watch a victory and not get annoyed and not have a furrowed brow. It would have been nice for the players, to go out there and get a victory and feel good about themselves for a week. I've been calling it a mental health victory. It would have been for them. They really needed something like that, but it didn't come. Didn't come today. The NFL can be a tough place to play sometimes. That's why they call it the pros. As it didn't work out today, we saw 26-22 loss, touchdown in the last minute of the game, blowing it for the Jets, winning it for the desperate Tennessee Titans as they continue their march to the playoffs. The Jets continue their march to nowhere, to at least maybe a top 5 pick in the draft. That's the only, right now, when they blew that game, unfortunately, again, it's another season where I'm saying to myself at the end of the year, well, it'll help us in April. It'll help us in the draft. It'll help us, but I'm sick of this. To be honest, I said this on, if you listened a couple of weeks ago, on my podcast. I had a podcast come out about two weeks ago, so where I had my special guest Bobo Curlin, who, if you stick around in a little bit, we're gonna be playing his new song Jingle Bells, a comedic take on it from him. He's a good friend of mine, so we'll check that out in a little bit. But I had him on, and we were discussing the game that hadn't happened yet, the Jets-Buffalo game. And unfortunately for me, as a Jet fan, I'd sit there and watch that. And before that game, I was saying to myself, you know what? You might as well keep Todd Bowles. There's no coach on the team, really. There's no one you're going to be keeping after this season. You're going to be cleaning house. So since you don't have a coach in waiting, you might as well just wait till the end of the year to fire Coach Bowles. And I thought that was a measured, reasonable response, even though I thought Bowles should have been fired a year or two ago. But after that Buffalo game, where they lost 41-10, one of the most ugly games that I've ever seen the Jets play in, and a loss to a team at home that, it's an unfathomable loss, just an embarrassment. And for that coach to not get fired, to be honest, look, I don't like calling for a guy's job, but sometimes you just know when it's time to go. Last year on my show, Coffee with Cramer, I'd be here every Saturday morning doing this show, and it just got to a certain point, especially after he benched Eli Manning, that it was obvious to everybody in town and the world, McAdoo had to go. It was a joke. The Giants were, the Giants weren't going anywhere, but man, they were getting killed every single week. Just bad decision after bad decision, and just dumb thing after dumb thing, and McAdoo just not knowing what to do in the big spot. But other than that, everybody knew that he had to go, and that's the point that we're at right now with Coach Todd Bowles. Look, I'm sure the guy's a nice guy. I'm sure if I ever sat down and talked football with him, I can learn a lot. But the fact of the matter is that he's not a good head coach right now. He was a terrific defensive coordinator, not a good head coach. And, I think a lot of people are still giving him credit for those first 15 games in 2015, where the Jets were 10-5, and it looked like they were a playoff team. But I think that was fool's gold, because 2016, 2017, and this season have proved otherwise. Now with this loss today, the Jets have lost 32 of their previous 34 games. It's not that bad. 32 of their previous 44 games, and it's just getting uglier and uglier and uglier. And I don't know how Coach Bowles continues to keep his job, although he won't at the end of the year. So I guess that's what it really comes down to. But just to see him on the sidelines, and especially today, saying that he's fuming. Now you're fuming. And everybody was saying, this is as angry as I've ever seen Coach Bowles on a Jets sideline or in a Jets press conference following a game. Yeah, it would have been nice to see that anger, that personality, a couple of years ago when it mattered. Now it's just like, okay, the soon-to-be former head coach of the Jets is bent out of shape. The team blew a 16-0 lead today. Okay, that's going to do anything for me? No. So, that's something that was getting on my nerves today. Everybody patting Bowles on the back for that, but whatever. And when we look on the other side of town, though, as we talk about the Jets as a ship going down, right now I think the Giants, on the other hand, are a team. I'm not going to say on the rise, because I'm not going to say, this momentum's carrying over to next year. The Giants still have a terrible team for the most part, especially on the defensive side of the ball right now. But I'll tell you this much: to see them go toe to toe with one of the top teams in the NFC and come out on top, and don't even bring up the fact that Chase Daniel was the quarterback. They didn't have Trubisky, because they got the job done against the Lions last week, and they didn't get the job done this week against the Giants. That's what it comes down to. Sure, they scored 27 points, but the Giants came to play 30-27 in overtime. They blew a 27-17 lead with under 2 minutes left. Yeah, that's right. They were up by 10 with under 2 minutes left. Somehow the Bears kicked a field goal and scored a touchdown in that time. and they ended up taking it to overtime. Terrific fight. I mean, Saquon Barkley had one of his signature games. He didn't score a touchdown, but he ended up with 2 great runs that set up a field goal at the end of the first half to cut the lead to 14-10. And he had a great run in overtime that set up the eventual game-winning field goal. 125 yards today for this young kid. Just great stuff out of him. Great stuff. It's exactly what you want to see out of if you're a Giants fan. And when you look at Chase Daniel too on the other side, Chase Daniel didn't play that bad today. He was okay. 26-39, 285 yards, a touchdown, and 2 picks. Both those picks were from Ogletree on the Giants, who had a great game today. But Eli Manning, who has been much maligned over the last few years right now, Manning 19-35, 170 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. Now, it's not going to knock your socks off, but it gets the job done, and that's what Eli needed today. He had a couple of big plays, threw a touchdown, a 50-plus yard touchdown. At one point, he had that great touchdown to, what's it called, to Odell Beckham Jr. in the end zone over there. It was just a terrific job by the Giants to see them all come together in this way. I really liked Pat Shurmur. I'll give Pat Shurmur all the credit in the world, going for that 4th down when they were up 17-14, 4th down in the red zone. I believe it was at the 3-yard line, and in that fade route, like I said, they hit Beckham. Just a terrific call, a gutsy call, because most people wouldn't have made that call, especially if you're a 3-8 team like the Giants. People would just say, okay, play it safe, take that field goal. You got a 20-14 lead. Now, you know what? If he takes that field goal, they probably lose this game, to be quite honest. And he turned it around, and the next thing you knew, it was a 24-14 lead. Then 27-17 ends up being 27-27, which must have been horrifying for Giants fans, and winning it eventually in overtime. Now, I was looking at some history between the Jets and the Giants too, where the road team has won the last 4 matchups between these two teams, including today, and the last time that the away team the home team has won the last 4 matchups, and the last time that the away team had actually won was on this date, December 2nd, 2007, as the Giants were on the road to Super Bowl against the undefeated Patriots team. They ended up in Chicago, defeating the, at that time, defending NFC champion Chicago Bears, 21-16 at Soldier Field, as Eli and company dropped the defending champs in route to their own title. And if you remember Derek Ward for the Giants, he had 24 carries for 154 yards that week. So that's just to take you a little back in time right there. But as we get back to 2018, the Giants go on to face the Redskins next week. And, the Redskins, like I said earlier in the pick segment, the Redskins have been scuffling since Alex Smith went down. Colt McCoy is a good quarterback who knows their system and everything. But with the way the Giants' offense has been playing lately, it might be a bit too much for that team to really, take down the Giants right now. I think the team we all expect to win the division now in the East is the Dallas Cowboys. It looks like the Redskins are probably on their last leg, and I didn't even mean that to take a shot at Alex Smith, who broke his leg in a very, very ugly fashion. And I'm a big Alex Smith fan, so here's to hoping that guy really recovers quickly, because he's a respected guy around the league. And plus, if you're a big fan of this kid Patrick Mahomes, the quarterback for the Kansas City Chiefs, you really got to tip your cap to a guy like Alex Smith, who took the time to mentor this kid last year when he knew the whole season that Mahomes was going to be taking his job. So it sucks to see a guy like that go down with a very tough injury like that. But so is the NFL, and just hope he recovers quickly. And one last thing before we move on here, I'd like to say that Coach Shermer really underwhelmed me a lot early on this season. Um, especially as recently as last week when they blew the game against Philadelphia. I really, really was down on this coach. This week he showed some guts, he showed some gumption, and he showed that the New York Giants are going to be a team that takes chances and plays for the win. You don't, especially if you're a bad team, you don't play for the tie. If you play for the tie, you're going to lose. You don't play conservatively, play aggressive, and I think he showed that. And at 4-8 right now, after a tough start for the Giants, I think they're heading in the right direction. And I think you add another top pick and maybe a little free agent money in this offseason, I think the Giants will be going just fine. If Pat Shermer's the coach, take them to the next level. I don't know. We still got to see a little bit more, see if he gets a better roster, what he does with it. But I think for the most part that we've seen some good signs the last few weeks. Even in losing last week against the Eagles, it was good to see them even put themselves in a position to lose that game like that. Which I know sounds a little crazy, but I hope you know what I mean. That they even put the defending champions in the hole like that. They couldn't hold on, but it's a good sign to me. It's a good sign. But all right, ladies and gentlemen, and with that, we're gonna go to our special treat right now. This is a special sneak peek at my buddy Daniel Bobo Curlin, produced by Lobo Sound. You can check them out on lobosound.com/Bobo. Check this out. I'll be right back. In a minute, I'm gonna come back on and use it as a bed.
Oh, you just same song?
Yeah. Because I'm gonna let it play for like 10 seconds and come right back.
Okay, well, yeah, that's not even a minute long. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. All right, and that's getting you into the holiday spirit. That's Daniel Bobo Curlin. Like I said, you can check him out, lobosound.com/Bobo. These guys, Lobo Sound, do a great job. It's really fantastic the way that these guys have produced this stuff. Like I said earlier, it's a labor of love for these guys. And just check it out. He put out a great EP over the summer, which sold well, also at lobosound.com/Bobo. You can check them out on Twitter at Lobo_sound. Give them a follow, check them out, and take the time to look it up because Bobo's a good kid and he really deserves your support. It's a very, very funny album. I've heard a couple of clips and I was laughing my butt off, and I think you'll really enjoy it. Absolutely, Vince and his brother out there in Chicago working for Lobo Sound do a terrific job. So take the time and check it out. It's cheap. It comes out December 10th of this year, so it's not tomorrow, but it's next Monday, and it'll be really cool if you check that out. I would really appreciate that, and all the best to Dan and to Lobo Sound, and I hope you guys sell 1 million copies. And all right, with that, we're gonna move on, and we're coming down the final stretch here, ladies and gentlemen, as we're getting near 10 o'clock here, and there's a couple of things I do want to get to. The Knicks game last night, man. If you were watching that Knicks game like I was and got to see such a terrific win, they played the Milwaukee Bucks, who, if you're a Knicks fan and you watched closely last season, if you watched closely last season, you would remember that Giannis, the Greek freak out there in Milwaukee, beat the Knicks twice in heartbreaking fashion. One was at the Garden, a last-second shot where he just tipped it in with like 2 seconds left, and very, very tough loss there. They lost another one in Milwaukee the same way, and it was setting up just for that this year too. At the Garden the other night, but they ended up coming back. They were down 14 points at one point. They were down 16 points at another point. It was just, it didn't look like it was going to be their night. This is the Bucks were 15-7. They're one of the best teams in the league. I think they're the second best team in the East overall. But this team just fought back. The Knicks ended up winning 136-134 in overtime, erasing multiple deficits, and they got standout performances from a bunch of guys. Overall, they were 20 of 34 from 3 points, so it was great to see. The real leader of the team from a performance standpoint, at least, Tim Hardaway Jr. had 21 points, 8 assists, although he did miss the free throw to tie the game with under a minute left, and that was concerning. But a guy who didn't miss many shots all night was Emmanuel Mudiay, 28 points, 7 assists, 4 of 5 from 3-point land. Hit a big shot to tie the game at 124 late in overtime. Noah Vonleh, who I've been such a big fan of this guy, played 36 minutes the other night, just pounding it the whole time, 15 points, 15 rebounds, didn't miss a shot. He was 6 for 6 from the floor. Kevin Knox he electrified the Garden. He hit 5 3-pointers. He was 5 for 12 overall, which isn't that impressive. But 5 3-pointers overall, I'll take that. 26 points. He had a couple of times in overtime where he had the Garden on their feet. Another guy, Damian Dotson, was all over the place, just fantastic. 21 points off the bench. Mitchell Robinson fouled out, but he was playing big minutes. And a guy who you will not see on the scorecard from that night because of DNP with coach's decision next to it, Frank Ntilikina. Now, I saw a lot of Knicks fans on Twitter who were bent out of shape about that. Not happy. To be honest, I'm a fan of Frank. I believe he should be given every opportunity to succeed. And I think so far, Coach Fizdale has done a good job with him. But he's being outplayed by Mudiay right now. He's being outplayed by everybody. And it does not bother me at all to see Frank ride the bench for a little bit, see what he's got, because I don't know, depending what the Phoenix Suns are offering, I might think about taking a trade like that. I know he's a 20-year-old kid. If it's a first-round pick, I'd consider it. I'd have to at least look at it. But I don't know, I still like Ntilikina. I probably wouldn't trade him, but I'd look at it. Just like I understand, as much as it annoys me, the Mets exploring the idea of a Syndergaard trade, which, just to let you know a little secret, the Mets should not trade Noah Syndergaard. But to get back to the Knicks real quick, just, you've got a lot of questions with Ntilikina. The team's 8-16 right now. They're obviously not a playoff team, so you just want to see growth from them. It was great to see the Knicks keep it together. Courtney Lee's right around the corner, going to be back. And tomorrow, they'll be playing the Wizards at the Garden at 7:30. So that's awesome. And let's hope they can keep this good feelings going. Just to wrap it up right now as we come to the final couple of minutes here on Sports Talk 1240, I just want to give a tip of the cap to Vic Hadfield with the New York Rangers tonight. This guy who's long deserving to have his sweater raised to Madison Square Garden rafters. He was a key member of the gag line, the goal a game, with Jean Rattel and Rod Gilbert on those 70s Rangers teams. Went to the Stanley Cup final in 71-72. So that second number 11, hanging right next to Mark Messier, is going up in the rafters and is actually up there already. It's a shame the Rangers had to blow a 3-0 lead in the third period tonight to do that. But what are you going to do? It's a young team, and they were bailed out early by Lundqvist anyway. And all right, ladies and gentlemen, well, that's just about it right here on Sports Talk 1240. Thank you for tuning in tonight and seeing everything. Don't forget to please go on lobosound.com and check out my buddy Dan Bubble Curlin and his stuff over there. Buy his Christmas album. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Cramer New York. That's CramerNY. And thanks for tuning in. See you next time on December 30th. Have a Merry Christmas.
This is WGBB AM 1240, W240 DF FM 95.9 Freeport, New York.